March 15th, 1944. In Japan, at the Naval Intelligence Headquarters, the Aoda Communication Unit sat silent, except for the faint hum of radio waves cutting through the air. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara leaned forward, eyes fixed on the glowing receiver. His third cup of bitter tea sat forgotten, growing cold on the desk beside him. For 18 long hours, he and his team of Japan's finest cryptanalysts strained their minds. Every tool, every technique, every known allied pattern, and yet nothing worked. The sounds flowing from the receiver were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Unlike diplomatic codes, unlike British naval chatter, unlike army transmissions, but structured, calculated, deliberate. Besetti, da Descartes. These weren't random noises, not static, but signals shaped by purpose. Timing that preceded American strikes, durations matching tactical orders, frequency patterns aligning with the protocols used by the Marine Corps. Yet the language itself remained impenetrable. Kurihara's jaw tightened, his brow furrowed. He had faced impossible puzzles before, but this was something new. The Aoda facility, just 20 miles outside Tokyo, was no ordinary post. It housed 500 highly trained personnel, operating 118 powerful radio receivers, and 20 direction finders scanning the Pacific. Kurihara's analysts had cracked the codes behind American diplomatic cables, British naval messages, Army communications, even the infamous Purple Code used by the State Department before Pearl Harbor, feeding Japan with crucial intelligence during the early war years. Yet here, in the middle of 1944, with 3 years of cryptanalysis behind them, Japan's best minds couldn't make sense of this, couldn't discern a single pattern, a single word. They were listening to the one unbroken code in modern military history. A code that would forever change warfare. But they didn't know it yet. The story. It began far from the Pacific Ocean, deep in the American Southwest, where for centuries the Navajo people had nurtured a language unlike any other on Earth. Diné Bizad, the Navajo language, belonged to the Athabascan family, spoken by nearly 170,000 souls in 1940. Confined to a 27,000-square-mile reservation spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. Its structure had evolved over millennia, built around verbs, actions layered with prefixes, combinations numbering in the millions. It used 4 distinct tones: high, low, rising, falling, each shift altering meanings entirely. One slip of pronunciation and a sentence could become meaningless. Its sounds were foreign to Japanese ears, foreign to English, even foreign to most world languages. Ejective stops, bursts of air from the glottis, voiceless lateral fricatives, like wind whistling through teeth, glottalized sonorants, nasalized vowels. For Japanese listeners trained in a language with just 5 vowels, hearing these sounds accurately was near impossible. But one man understood the fortress this language provided. Philip Johnston, born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary living on the Navajo reservation, grew up speaking the language fluently, one of fewer than 30 non-Navajos to make that claim. By age 9, he translated his father's sermons. By 15, he traveled to Washington, D.C., translating for Navajo leaders, meeting President Theodore Roosevelt himself. Then came December 1941 and Pearl Harbor's destruction. America reeled. Johnston read of Army units experimenting with Comanche speakers, training exercises in Louisiana. The Choctaw had served in World War I, but those efforts were scattered, improvised, limited. Johnston saw something bigger, revolutionary. A formal military code rooted in Navajo, unbreakable, practical, ready for modern war. On February 28, 1942, Johnston stood before Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego, presenting his idea. The demonstration stunned the room. 4 Navajo men from Los Angeles transmitted messages in 20 seconds, compared to 30 minutes using the M209 cipher machine. General Vogel authorized a pilot program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits stood in formation at Fort Wingate, New Mexico, sworn in as the first Code Talkers. Among them, Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, John Ben Jurley, men from across the reservation, some punished in boarding schools for speaking their mother tongue, others traditional herders living far from modern cities. At Camp Elliott, they labored for 8 weeks in a locked, guarded room, tasked with creating a military code within their own language. They had to invent terms for things that didn't exist, create an alphabet system, ensure memorability, allow expansion, all while making it impenetrable. They built it through cultural logic. A submarine, bestlow, and iron fish swimming beneath the waves. A battleship, Lot whale, the ocean's largest creature. Fighter planes, da hummingbird, darting through the sky. Bombers, Josho, buzzards circling before plunging. Each letter required creativity, multiple Navajo words, so patterns could not be analyzed. The letter E, the most common in English, received 4 alternatives: Zoli, elk, Ana, I tear, hair, ah, ear. Code talkers would randomly switch between options, destroying patterns. They developed 211 initial terms, memorized everything. No code books, no written keys, nothing that could fall into enemy hands. Chester Nez recalled, "In our culture, words hold power. Speaking correctly was sacred." The code's first test came in August 1942 at Guadalcanal. 15 code talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division.
The Japanese had anticipated the invasion, intercepting other Allied codes. But now, Marine tactical messages became unintelligible. At the Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers scrambled. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, educated at Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like language with consistent patterns, but it matches nothing. Not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, any Philippine dialect, any Chinese dialect, completely alien." Their confusion deepened. The Japanese response was systematic. Top cryptanalysts, wax cylinder recordings, linguistic consultants, even Buddhist monks studying ancient texts. Yet nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, code talker Chester Nez transmitted artillery coordinates, striking a Japanese machine gun nest. Intercepted, yet meaningless. Minutes later, American shells fell precisely on target. Colonel Haruo Konuma, intelligence officer for the 17th Army, wrote, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt. We can no longer anticipate attacks. We are fighting blind." Their desperation grew. Joe Kailumia, a Navajo soldier captured at Bataan in April 1942, fluent in Navajo but ignorant of the military code, became Japan's last hope. They interrogated him, tortured him, water torture, beatings, hours hanging by arms, forced to stand naked in snow until his feet froze, starved until his body wasted away. But through it all, Kailumia could only repeat the truth. He knew the words, but not the meaning. Japanese intelligence reports frustrated. The opinion appeared native to the mystery language, but cannot comprehend messages. Either extraordinary resistance or enemy using specialized code requiring training. The second assessment was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers could not decipher the code without proper training. Kailumia endured 3.5 years in captivity, convincing the enemy they faced something unprecedented. By late 1943, Japanese efforts faltered, and they largely abandoned attempts to crack the transmissions. Success at Guadalcanal led to immediate expansion. Major General Alexander Vandegrift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable. Their transmissions are faster than any encoding device and absolutely secure." A formal school at Camp Pendleton began training classes every 8 weeks. By war's end, between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines had served across all 6 divisions. Their training was unlike anything before. Practiced in soundproof booths, exposed to battlefield noises, running through exhaustion, wearing gas masks, transmitting in harsh conditions. Thomas B., who enlisted at 15, described, "They pushed us beyond possible. Lives depended."
As the war dragged on, Japan's frustration deepened. They had mastered mathematical codes, deciphered complex diplomatic traffic, even broken enemy supply lines. But this was something else entirely. It was as if the enemy had weaponized a mystery. Every attempt to unravel it only made them feel more defeated. By 1943, the Japanese Imperial Navy's 4th Section had assigned 30 of their top cryptographers solely to the task of cracking these messages. Day after day, hundreds of wax cylinders filled with intercepted transmissions were carefully labeled, catalogued, and studied. These transmissions weren't random. They followed structured patterns. They had a rhythm, a consistency, almost like a language, but no one could name it. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka, a brilliant cryptanalyst, tried something unusual. He turned to music, analyzing tonal patterns in the transmissions, searching for repetition, for hidden meaning. He compared them to Native American chants recorded during earlier expeditions. Nothing. He even consulted university professors and Buddhist monks well-versed in ancient languages. Nothing. Using specially designed equipment, they slowed the transmissions without altering the pitch. They stretched the sounds, hoping to isolate patterns. Still, nothing. Oscilloscopes traced waveforms, transforming sound into lines and curves, but the message remained elusive. Statistical analysis yielded hints at probable call signs, correlations between message length and operation complexity, but without meaning, without words, the information was useless. They even sought assistance from their allies, Germany. But wartime difficulties and German ignorance prevented any breakthrough. It was like chasing shadows in the dark, a phantom code beyond their comprehension. Orders came from the highest levels. Capture code talker equipment. Capture personnel alive. Rewards were offered. 10,000 yen, 10 years' salary, for anything that could expose the code's secrets. Several near captures, brushes with disaster, but no one ever succeeded. The code talkers were always one step ahead. Every soldier carefully memorized the code. No books, no notes, no maps. They drilled until exhaustion. They memorized words that had never existed before. Words born from tradition, woven into military tactics. The battlefields of the Pacific became their proving ground. At Tarawa, in November 1943, 6 code talkers relayed messages non-stop for 76 hours of grueling combat. Shells rained down, bullets screamed past, but they stayed on the airwaves. Lloyd Oliver, one of those brave souls, transmitted artillery coordinates continuously for 48 hours without rest. During the Mariana Campaign at Saipan, 24 code talkers worked tirelessly, their voices connecting units, coordinating firepower, and ensuring survival amid chaos. The Japanese, though experts at intercepting signals, were blindsided. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Hirakawa, an ace at decoding conventional communications, admitted that once the invasion began, tactical intelligence vanished like mist. They were flying blind. Colonel Takashi Saito later wrote, "Commanders felt abandoned, powerless without the intelligence they had come to depend upon."
And then there was Jimmy King. During a counterattack at Peleliu, after his partner fell in combat, Jimmy transmitted for 6 long hours, coordinating artillery from 3 battalions, 40 precise messages under direct fire. He didn't stop. He didn't falter. His voice became the lifeline that saved lives. But the greatest test came at the battle for Iwo Jima. Major Howard Connor was tasked with coordinating the entire initial assault. 6 code talkers working in teams operated continuously for the battle's critical first 48 hours. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the Japanese commander, had spent 2 years preparing, constructing underground fortresses with 11 miles of tunnels, planning every detail to intercept American communications and unleash deadly counterattacks. But it was all for nothing. Over those 2 days, the 6 code talkers transmitted and received over 800 flawless messages without a single error. They coordinated 30,000 Marines landing on hostile shores, naval gunfire from 100 ships, air support, medical evacuations, supply drops, enemy positions, tactical orders, all without breaking stride. Major Connor later testified, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. Okinawa would be their final challenge." 35 code talkers were deployed across the largest Pacific assault, 183,000 troops over 82 brutal days. The Japanese employed every trick they knew, jamming signals, mimicking voices, trying to match tonal qualities, but nothing came close. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto's attempts to mimic Navajo sounded to the code talkers like someone gargling while trying to talk. It was almost laughable. On August 14, 1945, the war's final chapter was written in code. Code talker Teddy Draper transmitted the most important message of the entire war. Nehema aedigini adenil. Japanese surrender. That message was sent first through the Navajo Code before conventional channels could carry the words. A fitting end to a mission carried out in silence, in secrecy, by men whose voices made victory possible. The war ended, but the silence surrounding these heroes did not. American interrogators poring over Japanese reports discovered the true extent of the enemy's failure. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisue, Japan's chief of intelligence, admitted with bitter honesty, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic traffic, but the Marine Tactical Code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto revealed, "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguists studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked." It was their greatest cryptoanalytic failure. In 1944, analysts suspected it might be an indigenous American language. But even with help from allies, the breakthrough never came. Colonel Masao Yamada admitted with regret, inability to read Marine communications cost thousands of lives. Every Marine operation after 1942 was a mystery until it began. The greatest tragedy wasn't that they lost. It was that they never understood the enemy, whose strength came not from machines, not from mathematics, but from people, from culture, from language. The Navajo Code Talkers remained unsung for decades, their names hidden, their achievements classified, their voices silenced by secrecy laws and national security. For years, these warriors, men who risked life and limb to guide Marines through hellish battlefields, returned to quiet lives, their contributions buried beneath the weight of classified documents. It wasn't until 1968, more than 2 decades after the war's end, that the code was finally declassified, that the truth could be told. Families gathered, veterans stood tall, and the world learned of a legacy built not on steel or firepower, but on trust, memory, and a language that carried the fate of a nation. The Navajo Code Talkers left a legacy beyond military achievement. Their story became a symbol of resilience, cultural pride, and quiet strength in the face of overwhelming odds. In reservation communities, elders whispered tales of courage, of young men who crossed oceans to fight for a country that often overlooked them, only to return heroes, unrecognized for years. For the Navajo people, this was more than a military assignment. It was a testament to the power of tradition, of language, of community. Generations that once feared speaking their native tongue proudly embraced it as a gift, a tool that saved countless lives. Veterans would tell children, "Our words were weapons. Our voices shielded an army." Chester Nez, the first enrolled code talker, would often recall, "We were boys, sent into war with nothing but our minds and the language our grandparents taught us." His eyes would moisten as he remembered fallen brothers, missed chances, battles that blurred into exhaustion. But pride radiated from his words. We carried more than messages. We carried trust. Carl Gorman, another pioneering code talker, once spoke of training days at Camp Elliott. "We drilled until our arms trembled, until our throats were raw, but we knew we were preparing for something far bigger than ourselves." These men, along with hundreds of others, became quiet heroes. They lived in homes scattered across the country, working as farmers, mechanics, teachers, raising families, while carrying a secret known only to a few. It wasn't until 2000, after relentless advocacy, that President Bill Clinton signed legislation recognizing the Code Talkers' contributions. In a ceremony at the White House, plaques, medals, and words of gratitude were presented. Long overdue honors for men who never sought fame. "We didn't do it for medals," said one veteran. "We did it because it was the right thing to do." The Navajo Code was more than language. It was a masterpiece of cryptography. Military experts marveled at how a community-based language could outperform mechanical systems under the harshest conditions. It used layers of substitution, alternate vocabulary, randomized structure, and tonal patterns that rendered frequency analysis useless. Dr. Alan Turing's techniques, once employed to break Nazi codes, stood powerless against it. Modern linguists continue to study how this code leveraged cultural nuance, metaphor, and oral tradition to create a secure communications system. For the Japanese crypto-analysts, the code remained a source of despair. After failing to break it by any means, technical, linguistic, or brute force, they redirected their efforts elsewhere, focusing on conventional codes, supply lines, espionage. Colonel Masao Yamada's reports reveal frustration, resignation, and respect. "We were outmatched," he admitted. "The enemy's strength lay not in machines, but in something beyond comprehension." The principles behind the Navajo Code Talkers echo in modern secure communication systems. Encryption algorithms, satellite guidance, and defense networks now rely on layered protocols, designed not unlike the code that once saved lives on the battlefield. The legacy of those brave Marines lives on in military academies, research centers, and in classrooms where their story inspires innovation. These men, ordinary by appearance, extraordinary by action, remind us that strength isn't measured by firepower or numbers, but by resilience, by culture, by the bonds we share. They remind us that sometimes the greatest weapon is a voice, a memory, a word passed from one generation to the next. So let us remember their courage, their sacrifice, their wisdom. Let their story echo through time, reminding us that heroes come in many forms, and that history is written not only by leaders and generals, but by those who answer the call when no one else can.
As the war ended, the guns fell silent, but the silence carried the weight of secrets, burdens, and sacrifices that few knew. For the Navajo Code Talkers, victory came at a cost far heavier than metals. After the guns were silenced, after the flags were lowered, the Code Talkers returned home, only to find doors closed, restaurants refusing them service, hotels turning them away, communities still bound by prejudice, heroes forced to hide their heroism. Chester, the last of the original 29 Code Talkers, once said, "We were warriors, but couldn't tell anyone." Imagine that, helping win a war, but carrying that secret alone. They weren't allowed to vote, not in New Mexico or Arizona until 1948. Not in Utah until 1957. The very country they saved treated them as outsiders. But healing came through tradition, through ceremonies that cleansed their spirits, rituals that reminded them their language was sacred, their identity powerful, even amidst the scars of battle. Dan Erkey explained, "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it to heal." And they did, embracing the enemy way ceremony to restore their souls. For decades, their service remained classified, locked away, hidden from public view. Only in 1968 did the truth begin to emerge, and by 1969, at a Marine Division reunion, their story finally came alive. In 1982, President Reagan declared August 14th as National Navajo Code Talkers Day, a day to honor their courage. And in 2001, President George W. Bush presented congressional gold medals to the remaining Code Talkers. Only 5 originals were alive to receive them, But the nation finally recognized the unbreakable legacy they had built. Today, we honored 29 Native Americans who gave their country a service only they could give, Bush declared. And Chester replied, "We were ordinary men, given an extraordinary task." Though the Navajo are the most famous, they were not alone. 14 other tribes contributed: Comanche on D-Day, Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, and many others, all bringing their languages to serve the cause of freedom. In 2008, the Code Talkers Recognition Act acknowledged every tribe's role, proving that diversity wasn't just cultural richness, it was a strategic force, a weapon, a shield. John Brown, Jr. observed, "They told us our language was no good, and then they needed it to win the war." How ironic, how profound. The Navajo Code didn't just defend, it modernized, inventing words for warfare where none existed, transforming metaphors, adapting grammar, making complexity elegant and practical. Dr. William Morgan remarked, "They proved indigenous languages aren't primitive. They could express everything from ceremony to war." They created not just a code, but a cultural encryption. No math could break it. A human fortress built from history, spirit, and identity. Today, even as quantum computers threaten encryption, the lessons of the Navajo remain, that some codes aren't mathematical, they're human, endlessly complex, beautifully unbreakable. In the 1990s, Japanese scholars revisited the failure, astonished by how such simplicity could defeat their greatest cryptographers. Even photographers like Kenji Kawano introduced Japan to the legacy, allowing former enemies to meet not as adversaries, but as fellow warriors, sharing respect. Code talker Albert Smith called them, "We were both warriors. My language helped defeat you, but now helps us understand each other." Today, only 2 code talkers remain: Thomas H. Begay and Peter MacDonald, not from the original 29, but pillars of the code's success. At age 96, MacDonald still speaks, reminding us, America's strength comes from diversity, from the many voices that shape who we are. What once was suppressed is now celebrated. Young Native Americans study their languages with pride. Governments fund preservation efforts, and history finally honors their contribution. Dr. Jennifer Dennett Solly observed, "They transformed how Native Americans see themselves and how America sees them. They showed that our languages aren't relics, but living, powerful resources." The Navajo Code Talkers' story is more than military history. It's a testament to human resilience, to how cultures thought broken became unbreakable forces of strength. Their message transcends war, transcends borders, transcends time. It reminds us our differences are not barriers, but bridges. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for joining me on this journey into one of the most incredible stories of courage, culture, and connection. If you loved this storytelling, if it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps more people discover these powerful stories and lets me bring you even more deep, meaningful journeys from the past. Together, let's honor the voices that shaped history and continue celebrating the diversity that makes us stronger. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and cherish every story.